It's the most wonderful time of the year, Podsters. And while, yes, I do mean the holiday season, I mean preparing for the holiday season so that we can enjoy the holidays with our families by talking about boundaries. You guessed it, Podsters. We have Barb Nangle coming back for the fourth time on Unmute Yourself, the podcast. Barb's episodes are some of the most widely loved, and we're back at it again. So here's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about how and when to set boundaries with others, how and when to set boundaries with ourselves. There's a few role plays thrown in there. And if you've listened to past episodes, you know that those are spicy. We talk about how boundaries are for you and not against others. And more importantly, or equally as important, if this is the case, why is it so hard for many of us to set and hold our boundaries? We talk a lot today about setting boundaries with ourselves. And this is something, frankly, Podsters, that I have struggled with over the past couple of months. And I got to tell you, I am pumped and ready. I have the basics. I am back to basics. And I am ready to jump into this holiday season knowing that I get to decide how I live my life. I get to decide who has access to me and my energy. And I get to decide how people treat me. You're in for a treat, Podsters. So let's take it away. Barb Nangle, welcome. Are you ready to speak up, stand out, and get your seat at the table? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast where you'll get real-life anecdotes and actionable tools for you to step into your strengths, debunk imposter syndrome, truly know your worth, and show up like you own the room every time. I'm your host, Nancy Medoff, who did the thing and followed my passion for empowering women like you to unleash that inner spark and become who you know you are meant to be. I'm a diehard foodie with a raging Skittles habit who will not stop until women everywhere unmute themselves and truly thrive at work, at home, or wherever you may be. Let's do this. Podsters, it's the most wonderful time of the year. And I'm not talking about the joy of the holidays, which is wonderful. I'm talking about this is the time of year when we bring back the boundary boss, the boundary queen, the boundary ninja, whatever you want to call her. This is, I think, Barb, this is your fourth
I think
episode. I
so.
think it
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
we have Barb Nangle here, Podsters. And if you're new, I have a lot of newer listeners, or we have a lot of newer Podsters. Barb is a boundary coach. I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second. And she comes back. I was looking through the podcast episodes every November for this is your third November that you're here.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about all things boundaries. And we're going to talk a little bit about holiday boundaries and how to set boundaries with other people. Really, we're going to focus on boundaries with yourself, which is something that I personally have struggled with recently. And I'm going to link all the previous episodes for all the super fun. We did a role play last year. It was awesome. So if you want to get right to boundaries with your family or friends or your boss for the holidays, go to episode 21, 51, and 76. I'm going to link those in the show notes. And if you want to really focus on boundaries for you and yourself or with yourself, this is the episode. So Barb, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm super excited to be here and for this conversation. And I love that you've invited me back this many times. People often say we'd love to have you back and then don't invite me back.
Oh, no, this
but
is
you do.
right. So selfishly, I know that I'm going to get so much out of this conversation.
Yeah.
It's not why I did
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
and I'm thrilled you're back. So tell the Podsters how excited you are because of your dream last night. Tell them your dream last night.
Okay, so it was this morning. I had this dream that Nancy was at my house, but it wasn't my house. It was my growing up house, and she was sitting out in the backyard. And I was like, wait, don't we have a call? And she was, I don't even remember what she said. And then my podcast manager was sitting over kind of like to the right of her. And then suddenly we were actually at my condo, and I was out in the front yard showing her my garden and saying, oh, yeah, Chuck created this for me, as if she knew him. And I
I
don't
love
know
it.
what to make of it. And then I was like, oh my God, don't we have a recording? And then we realized it was at 10. In fact, our call today is at 9.
That's
But
so
in the
funny.
dream, it was 9 and we both forgot. And then we realized it was 10. And
I love that. I
so
love it.
she was coming to me this morning before I even got on the call with
I love
her.
it. I love it. So tell the Podsters, Barb, about what you do and why you do it.
So I am a boundaries coach, a podcaster, and a professional speaker. And I do it because For the first 52 years of my life, I didn't have boundaries. They weren't even on my radar. I hit a codependent bottom when I invited a homeless friend to stay at my home. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me, and I soon felt trapped in my own home. And that landed me in 12-step recovery for codependence.
Mhm.
And because codependence is my core wound and boundaries are essentially the antidote to codependence, learning how to build healthy boundaries changed everything. I was working full time and I was astonished at the ripple effect of me alone building healthy boundaries on my
Mhm.
team. And this just goes to show that when one person changes the dynamics of their interactions with those around them, it changes everything. So we can't control other people, but we can influence other people.
Mhm.
Decided to start my own coaching and consulting business, started my podcast, which is called Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. My mission was level the playing field, which is why I went into urban education, because I felt like education had the greatest hope of leveling the playing field. What I realize now that this work that I'm doing is also about leveling the playing field, because my ideal client is a professional woman who says yes when she really wants to say no, and who neglects herself because she's so focused on others. Well, women are not going to make inroads into the power structures of society when they keep saying yes to shit they do not want to
I love
do,
it.
and when
Yep.
they keep neglecting themselves.
Okay. So
We're
I
busy doing other people's work.
can we let's pause there because
Mhm.
that's the meat of what I want to get into. So thank
Excellent.
you. Great. What I'd like to do, if it works for you, is bang out the boundaries with your family.
Hmm.
I'm not minimizing these. They're extraordinarily important, as you know. We had a
Hmm.
super fun
Hmm.
episode. Our last episode last November, we did a role play. And I'm
Hmm.
still in awe of Barb's confidence and conviction with her
Hmm.
boundaries. So I too did
Hmm.
not realize that boundaries were a thing until I was in my
Hmm.
much adulter years, much later. And it blew my mind when I realized that, oh, I get to decide how people treat me. I get to
Hmm.
decide who gets my energy. That was a game
Hmm.
changer. And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
for women that are, I think it applies to a lot of people. For women
Hmm.
that grew up in the, let's say, 70s and 80s, we watched our parents or our mothers in many cases not really have any boundaries. But it was a different
Hmm.
time then. Dinner was on the table at 6, the
Hmm.
husband, if you were in a family with a husband and a wife, they put the
Hmm.
food on the table, the mothers did the laundry, blah blah blah. So we didn't
Hmm.
really understand, well, wait a minute, I get to decide what I do and how I'm treated. So
Hmm.
what do you think is, if you were to pick one thing or one boundary, which I know this is going to be a difficult question,
Hmm.
that somebody who wasn't used to setting them could do for the holidays, what would you say would be the best boundary or the most powerful boundary? Or what's one thing that we can do to step into that confidence of saying,
Hmm.
this is how I will be treated?
Hmm. So rather than say what's one boundary, I like one thing. And the
Great.
one thing is make decisions ahead of time.
Yep.
So you're making decisions with your frontal lobe, where the higher order thinking is done. It's a rational decision. This is what I'm going to do and not do.
Hmm.
And then when you get into the situation, well, first of all, tell people ahead of time.
Right.
Like, don't wait until the situation arises. Say, for example, I know you want us to join you for Thanksgiving dinner. We're only going to be able to make it for dessert. And you call them ahead of time. You don't wait until they send you the invitation, or you wait until they call, right?
Hmm.
So you make a decision ahead of time. So the reason that you do it ahead of time is you're using your rational brain. You're preempting the conversation. So you're setting the tone of the conversation and feeling the main reason that people either don't set boundaries or cave on their boundaries. So when you're making a decision ahead of time, you're going with what you decided in your rational, intelligent, well-grounded mind.
Right.
And so the feelings are not going to, they may sway you, but they're less likely to sway you because you're not making the decision in the moment.
Yep.
So in one of my recovery programs, we call this being an actor rather than a reactor
Love it.
in your life. We're acting on life rather than reacting to it. And that's essentially what boundaries are about.
Love it.
You decide, this is how I want to live my life.
Hmm.
And then you live that way and you teach people, this is how you're going to get the best of me. I heard someone say the other day, and I love that. Like, if you want the best of me,
Hmm.
then, this is what I want and need.
Okay. I love this. So, Podsters, I am scribbling furiously. So, couple things. How this is how you're going to get the best of me. I love it. This is
Hmm.
how you can experience me at my best, right? I
Hmm.
love it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, as you were talking, I was thinking about it, and I can't remember if we talked about this in a past episode. I can't imagine we didn't. To me, as you were talking about, you set the boundary ahead of time when you're calm and when you're rational. So, I remember I had a career in sales. So salessters that are listening, this I think is going to be a really powerful connection for you. It's like a contract, and it's before things get heated. It's before, there's a crisis. It's before people are emotional. Like, we agreed ahead of time. And so let's take a contract. Client
Hmm.
cancels something, and I tell them they have to pay the cancellation fee, and they get all mad. So, okay, so this is why we talked ahead of time, and you agreed. You agreed that this is would be the result of this action. We did
Hmm.
it when we were calm and when we were happy and when everything was great. And we did it to avoid this situation, which is us not agreeing. So we agreed to it a few months ago, or we
Hmm.
agreed to it before I came to your home, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
And to me, it takes the emotion out.
Hmm.
Like, whoa, hold
Hmm.
on a minute. We talked
Hmm.
about this. This is what you said. This is
Hmm.
what I said. Therefore, I can now extricate myself from the situation, or I can now ask you to stay true to what you agreed to. It's like a contract. What do you think about
Hmm.
that?
I think that is absolutely beautiful, and I'm totally stealing that. I love
Please do.
that.
Please do.
That is
Please do.
well, and the thing is, policies and procedures are boundaries. A budget is a boundary. A contract is a boundary. I mean, boundaries permeate every single area of our lives.
They do. And I can't even Podsters. I cannot stress to you enough how much of a game changer this was in
Hmm.
my happiness. A-
Hmm.
And it really breaks my heart. I might get emotional. This usually happens when Barb comes on. That for years I didn't realize that I get to decide. You get to decide, Podsters. You get to
Hmm.
decide what is acceptable and what isn't. And you have that power. And
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
huge. That's
Yeah.
huge.
I'd like to share the story about my brother, and it actually was around the holidays.
I
So
remember this. It's a good
I
story.
first got into recovery in the spring of 2015. And my brother is a force of nature. So he's a very loud person. And he also is like literally swims and breathes politics. And right before I got into recovery, just decided to stop listening to the news and politics and staying away from controversy because it's not good for my nervous system.
Right.
So I thought as I was in my early recovery that I could go to my brother's house and say, hey, you're hurting my ears with your voice, and that he would just lower his voice. Nope, not a thing. Um, I thought that I could just say, hey, I really don't want to talk politics. And he would be like, oh, okay. He's literally incapable of talking quietly. He's literally incapable of not talking politics. So what I realized is that I thought that I could control him by telling him what my boundary is. And then I realized, oh, wait, these are my boundaries for me.
Hmm.
I'm the one that wants quiet talking. I'm the one that wants no politics. So I'm the one that has to ensure that happens. And I can't ensure that happens on his end because I can't control him. So what have I got to do? I've got to spend less time with him, and I've got to spend time with him less frequently. And that first Christmas, I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. Like, I can't stay this long. And then the next Christmas, Nancy, I said, I'm having Christmas at my house. And I can ask people to leave, but I also get to set the tone because my brother doesn't like to do any of the Christmas stuff. I like Christmas. I love Christmas. I love Christmas Hallmark movies. I want decorations. I want Christmas music. I want a traditional meal. He doesn't give a shit about any of that. So if I want that, then I get to provide that. And the other thing that happened that first Christmas of me being in recovery is that I brought gifts to my brother, his two children, who were almost grown then. and they didn't buy any gifts for me, but they bought gifts for each other. This has never happened. Like, if we're not going to exchange gifts, can we at least have a conversation? So they all gave each other gifts. I gave gifts to all of them, and nobody gave a gift for me. And it was just like, what? But I didn't have the wherewithal to say something. And I remember when we went to go sit down to eat, I told myself, I'm going to say something, and I couldn't do it. So I said to them the next year, I would like for us to exchange gifts. Let's put like a $10 value on it. Like, not something big. To me, like, if you don't have the money for gifts, fine, then say that. And that's happened before. That has happened in my family. But it was just this weird, awkward situation that just made me feel just, ugh. And so I don't have to put up with that. Now, since then, I have not spent the holidays with my family because it's just too difficult for me. I would rather be with my chosen family and spend time with people that I don't have to do so much emotional work. So
Hmm.
what I didn't know my entire life, Nancy, was that I did not have to take the onslaught of my brother's massive energy. I haven't seen him since before the pandemic, and he's really a mess now, and I really don't want to. And it's because I can't emotionally take it, and I get to choose that. I get to prioritize my own health, well-being, and nervous system. And it doesn't include being around my brother because he's very, very triggering for me. Now, this process happened over a number of years, but my entire life, I was like if you're watching the video, I'm like bracing myself for my
Hmm.
brother, but I wasn't
Hmm.
physically doing that. That's how I felt, but I didn't understand until I was in my 50s. I don't have to deal with this.
I love it.
I don't.
It's I want to drill down on that because when I got out of the shower this morning, I was thinking about, okay, what do we want to talk about? Um, Boundaries don't make you a bitch. They don't. And I don't, that's a little direct. I'm a direct,
Mhm.
but um they don't. What makes you a bitch is when, well, and let's rephrase. What makes you appear to be difficult is when you don't set the boundary. They don't understand the expectation. They don't understand why you're upset because many times, like let's take the example of your brother. He he probably doesn't speak that loud on purpose. It's who he is. And
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Right.
somebody said to me one time, people who feel heard don't need to yell. And I was like, bingo.
Wow. Say that again. Oh my God.
People who feel heard don't need to yell. Yeah.
Uh, uh, wow. Um,
Mhm.
that that's that's a big one. That's a big one for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's another episode. So,
Yeah.
like that just there are two people that are yeah, wow. Okay. Okay. So, that's a good one. Um, and as you were talking, I was thinking, I think I just said this, the boundaries help them. So I'm thinking, like, let's say
Mhm.
my husband,
Mhm.
Danny, who's
Mhm.
just the best guy in the world. He might be slipping back into an old pattern. And if we set a boundary and I say, hun, we talked about this and we talked
Mhm.
about that when you say this is what happens and how I feel, and
Mhm.
this is what's going
Mhm.
to it helps them check themselves. If you're with someone,
Mhm.
if it's
Mhm.
somebody
Mhm.
that wants to be with you or wants to
Mhm. Mhm.
be a part of that. Okay, so let's go back to some holiday boundaries. I'm trying to think of one we can do before we jump into the self boundaries because that
Mhm.
it's a holiday season. So let's talk about let's skip the politics thing.
Mhm.
This is a big one because people are
Mhm.
still talking about politics. And to me, like,
Mhm.
so right now for me, it's simple. Hey, would love to have you come over for Thanksgiving. So excited you're coming.
Mhm.
I want to make sure everybody has a good time. And the best way for me to do that, including myself, is to ask that we don't talk about politics. It's not you don't talk about politics. Is to ask
Mhm.
that we don't talk about politics. I know that's hard for a lot of people. It's
Mhm.
something that I'm asking people to commit to. If that's is that
Mhm.
something you think you can do?
Mhm.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So then they come and let's do a quick role play. Then they come
Mhm.
and they
Mhm.
start talking about politics, right?
Yeah.
So,
So here's what I would do. Excuse
yeah.
me. I'm going to stop you right there. So I've already asked everybody ahead of time, we're not going to talk politics. So if you want to talk politics, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
That's big. So you would start right away with, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Yeah.
See
Yeah.
now, okay,
Because I
so
told you ahead of time. Like
right.
I cleared it with everybody ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was on the same
Mm-hmm.
page before we got there. If I just brought it up
Right.
at the meal,
Right.
then I probably wouldn't
Right.
start with I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
So why wouldn't you start with, because this is what I would do. I would start
Hmm.
with, let's say, Carlo. I have a friend Carlo coming for Thanksgiving. Now,
Hmm.
Carlo would never talk
Hmm.
about politics at the dinner table.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm gonna use him. Hey Carlo, can I talk to you for a second? I would probably pull him aside,
Hmm.
probably, and say, hey
Hmm.
Carlo, we talked ahead of time that we weren't going to talk about. I'm going to ask you to stop talking about politics.
Hmm.
I would ask him first because
Hmm.
maybe he forgot, or maybe he's just so excited about it. I don't know.
Hmm.
And give
hmm
him the chance to correct the behavior before I boot him.
hmm
What do you
hmm
think about that?
So I think that you can do whatever works for you, but for me, I would do it publicly so
Yep.
that everybody knows the message this person is getting and the message is for them too.
Right.
Like
And
this is I'm in charge here
mhm,
and I'm going to enforce this boundary no matter who you are.
yep. So
Like I'm creating the safety of this
I
environment
love
because
it.
this is my home and my event and
I
you
love
can
it.
count on me
Yep.
to enforce the boundary. And also, hello, I'm a fucking boundaries coach,
Right. So,
you
but let me
know?
ask you this. So, and I agree with you. In retrospect, I probably would do it publicly, but
Mm,
let's say you're at the table. Hey, Carlo, we all agree we weren't going to talk about politics. So let's
mm,
let's leave that
mm,
at the door. And then
mm,
like 10 minutes later, he does it again. So I guess my
mm,
question is, why would you go right to you're leaving or get
mm.
out if you can't do that versus a friendly reminder?
Yeah. So what I said was, if you continue to talk about politics, I will ask you to leave. Not, I'm asking you to leave right now.
Fair. Good.
If you continue to talk about politics, I will ask you to leave.
Mm,
So then if he starts talking about politics 10 minutes later, say, you know what, I've already asked you not to talk politics and I told you that I'm going to ask you to leave if you do it again and you've done it. And I'm sorry to do this, but I want to have a pleasant evening. I want my guests to have a pleasant evening and we can't when we're talking politics. So hopefully next time you'll be able to stick to this.
yep. Great. Um, Same thing. You just flip it if you're at someone else's house. So let's say you set the
Hmm.
boundary ahead of time.
Hmm.
Somebody starts talking about politics. Hey, we talked ahead of time.
Hmm.
If you continue to talk about politics, I'm going to leave. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is interesting because I had this conversation with Danny a few years ago. And it was around politics, talking about politics. It was during an election cycle. And at the time, I could not deal with the conversation. I couldn't. It was affecting my mental health. I couldn't.
Mhm.
So I remember we were out for a hike and I said, hey, hon, I'm going to ask you over the coming weeks when we're out to dinner with people, please don't bring up politics. I can't deal with it. This is about me. I can't. And you can talk to them about it a separate time. It's going to make the event unenjoyable. Please. And it took him a little while for him to understand. He's like, well, you're trying to filter what I say. And I'm like, no, I'm not, honey. I'm not. You should and can say whatever you want. I am telling you that for me, it is affecting my mental health. And if you want me to have an enjoyable dinner, I'm going to ask you not to bring it up. And if you bring it up, I need you to really hear me. I am going to leave the table because I can't take
Mhm.
it. I can't take it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it took him a little while to understand I wasn't
Mhm.
trying to control him. I wasn't trying
Mhm.
to
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
shut him down. I
Mhm.
was saying, help me, because when you do
Mhm.
this, I
Mhm.
can't handle it.
Mhm.
And
Right.
it was a
Yeah.
really good conversation. It was a good
Yeah, that's
conversation.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, so a couple of things occurred to me. So that I want to share. One is my boundaries are for me.
I love it.
They're not against you. So people may feel like they're against them. This goes to the thing where you're not a bitch for setting a boundary. Some people might interpret you as being a bitch and there's nothing you can do about that. That's on them, right? And like one of the massive like things that happens as you build healthy boundaries is you start caring more what you think of yourself than what other people think of you. That to me was the core of me being able to go
I
from
love it.
50 something years with no boundaries to having healthy boundaries. And it doesn't mean I don't care at all what other people think of me. Of course I do. I'm just no longer willing to throw my integrity out the window so that people will approve of me. So It's okay to seek other people's approval, but only if you have your own approval first.
Mm-hmm.
So my boundaries are for me, not against you. And then the other thing you told him was the consequences, which, you can do and say whatever you want. But if you choose to start talking politics at the table, the consequences, I'm going to be getting up and leaving. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you.
Right.
And it's not to stop you from talking about politics, it's to protect me from
Right.
hearing about
Right.
politics
Right.
because I have to take care of me. I'm asking
Mhm.
you to join me in that. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. But I would really like you to. So my sweetheart also is very into politics. And he occasionally he will say, "Did you hear about the XYZ?" And I'm like, "You know that you're my source of news." And he only tells me things like that are giant, right? And that, like like three people texted me the day after the election. They were like, "What do you feel about the election?" And I was like, "Let me Google it," because I didn't even know like who won, right? Because I just don't pay attention because it's so not good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And but he knows like we're not talking politics in Barb's people. Like it's just not something that we're doing.
Yep.
And every once in a while, he'll start talking about something, and I'll be like, I'm going to have to stop you right there. Like my heart is starting to race. Like I just can't, And if you want to have good quality time with me, like you don't want me sitting here all anxious and heart
So
racing and all that sort of thing.
this is great because I think a couple of things. I think when you tell the person, if it's a person that you care about and that that you're in some kind of relationship with, could be a family member, could be a friend, whatever.
Mm,
Here's here's what happens when you do that. And I'm going to go back to the politics discussion. You, husband, can compartmentalize. I can't. I'll give
yeah.
you another example. Sometimes uh, he will bring up a really emotional or sensitive topic very late at night. He can compartmentalize. He can then go right to sleep. I can't. So, so I'll say, hun, can we please, we talked about this. I can't shut it down like this. Can we talk about this another time? And he gets it. And it's just that it's not good for me. It's not good for me. And
Mhm,
that
mhm.
really, I think that's how you do it without sounding like a bitch, in my opinion.
Right, right. And the other thing is that what you're showing your partner is that they can count on you to take care of yourself.
Mm.
They don't have to guess, what does Nancy need? What does Barb need? So my sweetheart has a chronic illness. If I had dated him before I had healthy boundaries, like I couldn't have because I would be trying to control him and taking care of him and like feeling his pain and all that stuff. And so he has to go to the emergency room on like several times a year. And I often am with him when he goes. And I'm able to maintain a sense of calm and just be a really stable force because it's not happening to me and I know it, whereas everything else around me was happening to me. And so after the second or third time in the early relationship, when I went to the emergency room with him, he said, "I can't tell you what a relief it is to me to know that I get to just be sick and I don't have to worry about you and how this is affecting you and what you're feeling and thinking. I get to just be sick and you are taking care of yourself and you're also loving on me, which is amazing." And it's just like I am able to be a stable force in his life. And actually, I just remember the last time that we went to the emergency room, we were out in the hallway and there was this much older gentleman in a room. And his aide came to me and said, "This guy wants to come and talk to you, wants you to come and talk to him." And he said, "I've been watching you with your husband," who's not my husband, but whatever. He goes, "I've been watching you with your husband, and you are an absolute angel, and you are a force of light, and you remind me of my wife, who can't be here with me right now because she's in a nursing home. And you're really doing good things." And I literally just busted out crying. And I'm like, I'm just being who I am now, which is a stable force because I'm situated in me, in my life, in my body, and I take care of myself. So I want to share this metaphor. I learned this from Ashley Kirkwood. She wrote the
Mm-hmm.
book Speak Your Way to Cash. She says, don't try to pour from an empty cup,
Mm-hmm.
pour from the overflow.
Yep.
So the only way you can have an overflow is if you fill your cup first. And if you
Mm-hmm.
pour from the overflow, your cup is always full,
Yep. Yep.
right? And so we have this notion in our society that it's somehow selfish to take care of yourself. Selfish is actually like an epithet for women. I had a client tell me, I'd rather be called a whore than selfish. Like, what the fuck is going on in our society if a woman would rather be called a whore than selfish? So this word is bandied about kind of to control women. And so it's not selfish to take care of yourself. It's self-preservation, and it's actually selfless, because if you're constantly pouring from the overflow, you are giving generously to other people.
Yes.
Like, who would you rather receive from? Someone who's trying to squeeze out something from an empty cup, or someone that is generously giving from the overflow?
Yep.
Of course, everybody would like to receive from the latter, right? And so we're always teaching people, like, especially if you're a mom, you're role modeling. You're saying, if you're pouring from an empty cup, I'm expendable. And when you grow up, daughters, you will be expendable
Yep.
too. And
Yes.
you're not expendable. So learning to put yourself first and take care of yourself is really, really important. And I don't think it's an accident that I became a boundaries coach, because as a boundaries coach, I cannot let go of my boundaries. And, as we were talking before we started to record, like, I am realizing I do a lot of self-care, but it hasn't been enough. And
Yep.
I am really, really like slowing the F down
Okay.
and taking a lot more breaks and going outside and resting and playing and connecting with friends than I have in a very long time, because I have to fuel my tank. And I'm getting ready to really grow my business more. And there's no way that I could sustain it at the level that I was pushing myself. Now, I didn't work, 15 hours a day, but while I was working, it was like in this rush, rush, rush mode. I can't sustain that. My nervous system has been out of whack,
So,
so I have to set these boundaries for me.
right,
Nobody else can do it.
right. That's a great segue to self boundaries, which is what I wanted to talk about the most. So, thank you.
Mm,
So, why? Because I too was struggling. I'm getting better. I used to really. I had my routines. I had my
mhm,
rituals. I mean, and
mhm,
I felt so good, and
mhm,
that has gone
mhm,
out the window in the past year or so. So,
mhm.
why do you think it is so hard for us to honor our boundaries with ourselves?
For me, it's the codependence, because a codependent is someone who is really focused on the outside of themselves. And I think of myself as a recovered codependent. I think maybe I need to switch that to recovering. But I'll give you an example. So I have accountability partners for things like yoga and meditation. And I have accountability partners, and I think of it as me leveraging my codependent powers for good.
That's great.
So I care what other people think. I'm always going to care what other people think. I want them to think well of me. And all my life, my codependence has benefited other people. So now I'm learning to use that in
Great.
such a way that it benefits me. So I'm more likely to follow through if I tell you I'm going to do something than if I don't, right? That's just the nature of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, like one of the things that allows me to actually follow through for myself, is the benefits I get when I follow through for myself. But the thing is, things change. Our lives change. I have like a whole host of morning rituals that I do, and I've learned that I get to switch them around. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be the same every single day. Like, I have got to meditate every single day. Part of my recovery is I engage in reparenting. And so now I check in with my inner family members every day. And some of you may think, like, what does that mean? Listen to my podcast if you want to hear more about that. But it's a way for me to help heal and soothe myself every single day. And I have really learned to change things around. So just like you, I have had very much very routine life. And I work in time blocks. I use the Pomodoro timer, and it's really, really worked for me. But lately, it hasn't been. And so I've decided to not let it go entirely, But to relax that and to ensure, like, things that I have got to do is I have got to go outside every day for at least 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I have got to take a break and do something creative, even if it's for 5 minutes.
I love it.
I have got to play and have fun. So the other day I was like, oh, I'm going to watch otter videos. Have you ever watched videos of otters playing in the water? Oh my God, they're so playful and adorable. It's hard to not smile when you're doing that. You know, sometimes I'll listen to, like, 10 minutes of like a comedy
Yeah. Yeah.
video or
Yeah.
something like that, just to like get me out of whatever I'm
Yep.
doing. And
I love it.
part of the reason that I've gotten so entrenched in what I do is I love everything about my business. Well, okay, I don't really enjoy the finances. That part I don't enjoy. But everything else, I love connecting with other people. I love creating content. I love communicating with people. I love networking. I love coming up with ideas for how to help my clients. I love coaching. I love
Mm-hmm.
all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't feel like work. So it's sometimes hard to stop. Now, I usually don't work past like 6:30 p.m. at night, except for like on extenuating circumstances. The other thing is I have been doing my podcast on Sunday afternoons for 5.5 years. And I just decided 2 weeks ago, I've been saying that's going to come off the weekends. That's going to come off
Yeah.
the weekends. And a
Yep.
couple weeks ago, I was like, this is the time. Like, I'm not doing it on weekends. It's just, I'm not doing it anymore.
Right.
So now I will take prospective client calls on a weekend. That's it. There's no coaching on weekends. I will do a speaking engagement on a weekend, right? But that doesn't happen all the time. But I'm not coaching clients on weekends. I'm not running workshops on weekends. It's just not fucking happening
So why are you
because
why would you take a discovery call on a weekend?
because it's only a half an hour and I know days ahead of time and but I also have only so much time available on my calendar on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind. I enjoy
Okay,
those.
because so
Yeah.
it does you don't mind it you like
No.
it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, a couple things here that you talked about that I want to drill down on a little bit. I don't know why I keep holding my microphone here to my ear,
I see that
and
and I was
I
wondering that because you also have a microphone in
I
front of
know.
your
Uh-huh.
face.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just want to make sure everybody can really hear me. Um, so a few things that I want to, excuse me, drill down on. Okay. The accountability thing.
Mhm.
That is so powerful. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about that could be anything, right? So that could be you're going to
Mhm.
meet me at the gym twice a week, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
For me, this just happened last night. So Danny and I were in separate places. He was in Boston, I'm on the Cape. And I'm really trying to get back to my evening rituals, really hard. So it was, and I used to go up to my bedroom by like 8:30 or 9. Doesn't mean I'm
Mhm.
sleeping, but I get
Mhm.
out of the living room or the kitchen, right?
Mhm.
Like, because then I'm going to be
Mhm.
doing stuff. So it
Mhm.
was 9 o'clock, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm on the couch." And he said, "How come you haven't gone upstairs yet?" And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go upstairs. And I went upstairs, and it was so that was really helpful. The other thing is, what I wrote down was rebuild my rituals. So,
Mhm.
so my bedtime routine used to be upstairs by 8:30 or 9, meditate, sleep meditation, usually take a shower to kind of wash off the day, light a candle, all that
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
That is overwhelming to me right now. And I'm not gonna self-analyze and try to figure out why. It just is. So instead,
Mhm.
this week, my goal is to go upstairs and go in the bedroom before 9 o'clock. Next week, it's going to be to get in bed, go upstairs by 9 o'clock and add another of the
Mhm.
rituals back in because that worked for me. But I
Mhm.
liked what you said
Mhm.
is you can switch out your rituals because they change. And what worked for me 2 years ago might not work for me now. And that's
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm.
What will
Mhm.
work for me now? I think that's really powerful. That's really powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have so many different things that I do like I have more options in the morning than I do in the evening, and I like them all. But sometimes they don't feel like one thing is I used to journal, I call it mindset journaling. And then I realized writing a lot doesn't, it hurts my hand after a while. So instead, I just read the same statements. Well, after a while, it's like wah, 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 right? Just like the Charlie Brown adults. Like I don't hear them. So I need to switch it up and do something different. And, my life before recovery I held myself to some really high standards and there was a rigidity about it. And if I'm being rigid about my rituals, that's not energizing. Like to me, my rituals are about what fuels me, what energizes me. And if
Yes.
I am being rigid about my rituals, then they're draining me.
Right.
They're
That's
not,
right. Yeah.
right? So this is about what makes me be like, I want to have a powerful living experience. I want to live a life of purpose and meaning. Is it giving me a powerful living experience? Am I living a life of purpose and meaning if I'm being rigid about my rituals?
No.
So I've kept a gratitude journal for 24 years, every single night. Well, not every single night. That's the thing, is occasionally I let it go. Well, I've been letting it
Fine.
go a lot more.
Okay.
And then what I do is as I'm falling asleep, I start thinking about the things that I'm grateful for. I
Yep.
also do
Beautiful.
nightly inventory because that's part of my 12-step recovery. I don't do that every single night anymore either because it's too rigid. Sometimes I literally just want to shut the light out and go to sleep,
Great. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So I recently got a Michael Hyatt planner. Have you heard of these?
Mm-mm.
So it's called the Full Focus Planner. It's pretty popular. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And it looks at the 9 areas of your life. It's not just a day timer, like it's powerful.
Mm-hmm,
And one of the
mm-hmm,
things they have you do is, or they suggest is to write out how much time it takes for each step in your ritual, whatever it is. So let's say it's the morning,
mm-hmm,
right? How much time I
mm-hmm,
make my coffee, how much time I, and as I was doing it, because I need to go back to basics, like this is how far gone I am to
mm-hmm,
what I know I need to do. So I'm like, all right, back to
mm-hmm,
basics. Great. No shame.
mm-hmm,
Back to basics.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I wrote it out. My morning ritual takes 15 minutes. 15 minutes. So, like, what's your problem, Nancy? 15
Yeah,
minutes. Say,
yeah.
and that I thought was very helpful for me. It was 5 minutes doing this, 5 minutes this. Oh, all
Mm-hmm,
right. Well, I guess I
mm-hmm,
can, of course, I can do that. It was
mm-hmm.
super helpful. What about this one? I don't think it'll stump you, but my goal here is to stump Barb because she knows everything about boundaries.
I don't know everything, but
So
anyway.
the self boundaries. So when it's with yourself, and you talked about, the codependence, but so let's say my boundary is I'm only going to check email twice a day.
Mhm.
And I can't do that. I check emails 12, 15, 20 times a day. Walk me through how that's codependence because I want to fix that.
I don't know if that's necessarily, I guess that could be considered codependence, but like I would, if that was me,
Yep.
I would do some journaling about what's going on here. Like, first of all, why did I make that rule for myself that I wanted to only check email twice a day? So why did I do that? And then what am I getting out of checking email 12 times a day? So like if it was me, it would be that I'm being a reactor rather than an actor in my life. I'm not living on purpose. I'm letting the outside world dictate how I live my life, which I guess that goes to the codependence. And I'm probably dissociating from something that I don't want to do. Like there's probably something that when I said I'm only going to check email twice a day, there were probably other things that I wanted to do with my time. And it might be an avoidance behavior
Mm.
because when I'm checking email, I feel like I'm doing something.
And helping. For
Like
me, it's I
I'm
think I'm
productive.
helping.
Yes,
Right,
right. There
right,
you go. Right.
right.
So I'm helping someone else. Now,
Hmm.
you're still helping them if you check twice a day. It's just that you're probably doing it with more clarity and
Love
purpose.
it. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, I can tell you right now, for me, it's going back to behaviors from many, many, many years ago that I specifically left that
Hmm.
situation so
Yeah.
that I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's really easy
Yeah.
to slip back into your old behaviors.
Oh, yeah, yeah. When I worked at Yale, so I ran programs in sometimes up to 25 schools at a time. And so I had the ringer on my email. And I would drop whatever I was doing when an email came in. And so I got the
Uh,
reputation of being incredibly responsive to other people, but it meant I could never get my shit done. I couldn't do any large projects because I was interrupted all the time. So it was for those people were like, yay, I can count on Barb to respond to me very quickly. But for me, it was like my nervous system was firing off all the time. And so this is one of the reasons why I use the Pomodoro technique, because when I'm in a timed period, I'm able to stay focused
mhm,
on that. I just was not, I'm like a recovering multitasker. And when I was trying to make and it's not that I'm not a multitasker, I definitely still am, but nothing like I used to be. I used to
mhm,
flip from thing to thing to
mhm,
thing
mhm.
all the time. And now I usually get at least 25 minutes in a chunk that are focused on one thing. And what's insane to me is how much I can get done in 25
It's
minutes because I'm
amazing.
focused on one thing. I'm able to get into flow, and the creation process happens much more abundantly when you're in flow than when you're distracted with all these different things. And so, for me, like being able to focus on one thing just really, really changes. But I had never done that. So I hear you. Like I was the same way, that I was
Right.
just like basically at everybody else's beck and call all the time.
Yeah.
So if we go back to your example, and like I would do some self-assessment and say, like, why did I make this rule in the first place? What is so difficult about, like, what am I getting out of checking it 12 to 15 times a day? And then, like, what am I going to do with, like, how do I bridge those two things? So maybe it's, I'm going to check my email 4 times a day instead of 2 times a day, and then try that. And then do that for a couple weeks and then re-examine the process. You can't, until you know what's going on, like
Mhm,
awareness is the first step in any kind of change
mhm,
process, right? So
mhm.
like what's going on? Like what is the need that I'm fulfilling
Right.
by not honoring myself?
Right. It sounds so simple, and yet, you're getting something out of the behavior. That to me is where a lot of the work really comes in. Is like, okay, what are you
Hmm.
getting out of
Hmm.
this? If
Hmm.
it's so and so always cancels on me at the last minute and I let them. Okay, well, what are you getting out of it? Well, I don't want to disappoint them.
What, or you get to
Maybe.
blame them for your problems,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I let them, right? So then
Right.
you get to say, "Oh, I can't count on her." So like I had
Right.
a friend like that. So here's what I started doing. I only get together with that friend when there's other people involved. That way, if they don't show up, then I still have my event, you
That's
know?
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So wait, I want to say something also. You said it's simple. So a lot of this is simple, but not easy. Like the
yes.
mechanics of what we want to do is not complex. The effort and the mental and emotional work that we have to do it, not fucking easy.
Uh, Absolutely. Yes. And that's a
Right.
very important distinction. Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
this
Right.
is why having support is so helpful, whether it's, having a boundary buddy, having an accountability partner, having a community of other, women, business or entrepreneurs, that can help you hold accountable. Co-working can be really helpful for
Mm-hmm.
people. You sign on to a call and you say, this is what I'm going to do at this time. And then you get back together at the end of the call and say, like, what'd you do?
Yep. I totally. And I also think and it depends on the situation. The more you talk about why you're setting this boundary with the person, the more they can get in on the game. The more they
Hmm.
have skin in
Hmm.
the game. If they
Hmm.
understand,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah.
But I do want to say a word of caution about that. You don't actually have to explain your boundaries to anybody. And there are many
Correct.
people
Yep.
that it is not a good idea to explain. You just
It's a
tell
good
them
thing.
this is, and I also want to say I'm not a fan of using the word boundary when you're setting boundaries with people, because there are so many myths and misconceptions about what a boundary is
Mhm.
that it can be inflammatory. And so you just say like what the thing is. But like the situations that you described with your husband, I think it's beautiful because you have a
Right.
relationship, he's
Different.
invested in your
Right.
well-being.
Right.
It absolutely makes sense. Same thing with me and my sweetheart. Like I
Hmm.
go into the explanation. But if I have like a colleague who like just doesn't listen to me, then I'm just saying like I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. I won't be there. I don't know
So
if you've
yeah.
heard me, but I'm not going to be there. Like, I'm not going to explain why I'm not going to be there because it's none of their business.
So
They just need
let's
to hear that I'm not going to be there.
let's this is a good point because we only have a few minutes. Let's go to boundary basics because we've been this is our fourth episode, so
Mhm.
we're kind of like way down here. So for
Mhm.
people who aren't, or maybe you need to go back to basics, so let's talk about the basics of setting a productive and helpful boundary. Because, and you did
Mhm.
this on the last couple of episodes, and I think it's
Mhm.
important that we do it again,
Mhm.
particularly because we're coming up on the holidays. So
Mhm.
walk us through the basics of setting a clear and kind boundary.
Yeah, so first you have to decide like what matters to me. That's where it starts. Like, what do I care about? I start my clients with their top five values because they serve as guideposts for when and where to set boundaries, and they should be your boundaries should be upholding and supporting and promoting your values. So, what matters to me? So, let's say that it's the holiday season, and what matters to you is spending joyful time with people that you love. So, what that means is you're not going to spend unjoyful time with people that you don't really care about. So, perhaps you're going to decline the office party invitation, right? Perhaps you're going to have a party at your house instead of going to 15 different parties
Mm-hmm.
so that you can see all of the people. Or perhaps you're going to invite six people to your house so you can spend quality time with those six people rather than the 45 people that you normally invite, right? So you decide ahead of time what matters to me. Like it's got to start from there. And then you think about how do I get what I want? Like, so if it's spend like deep quality time with people I love, then perhaps it's I'm just going to invite six people over and we're going to have like a nice leisurely dinner and we're going to play games afterwards and then we're going to exchange presents or whatever the rituals are in your holiday traditions, something like that. So I think it absolutely has to start with what you care about.
So what matters to me? How do I get what I want? Right. And then
Hmm.
I think that's powerful. And then, so let's set the boundary. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's about you. The boundary is
Hmm.
about me, not you. So walk us through
Hmm.
that, like physically how to set it.
Yeah, so let's say that you've been having a 45-person party every single year and you've done it for years on end. So what I would do is I would send an email to everyone to say, I'm changing things up this year. I'm not going to have the big party that I had before. I know that some of you are going to be disappointed, but I want to put my energy in different places. And so I want to free you up. I want to let you know now so that you can, feel free to make plans for yourself. And I hope you enjoy the holidays. So let people know as far in advance ahead of time, especially if it's something you've been doing for years on end. And, some people are going to be miffed by that. And so maybe decide ahead of time, what is it that you want to say to people? Like deciding ahead of time makes all the difference in the world because you're not responding from that emotional part where
Mm-hmm.
you feel badly and you don't want, like, okay, and I want to make this distinction. You might hurt people's feelings, but you're not harming them. So there's a difference between harming someone and hurting someone. So it might hurt you to use a needle to take a splinter out of your finger. It's not going to harm you. In fact, it's going to heal you.
Mm-hmm.
It might hurt someone's feelings to set a boundary with them, but it's not going to harm them. It might actually heal your relationship with them because you're being honest with them about what's okay and not okay. But even if it doesn't heal your relationship with that person, it heals your relationship with yourself because you're showing up for yourself and having your own back in a way that maybe you never did before,
Mm. And it's a game
right?
changer. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we're so concerned about hurting other people's feelings, what we're not considering is that we've been hurting our own feelings probably for decades, and you get to be included in the people whose feelings you don't hurt.
I love it.
So, Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School says
Yeah.
this. She says, if you're going to disappoint someone, it shouldn't be you.
Love
Well,
it.
I say, if you're going to hurt someone's feelings, it shouldn't be you. Now, again, I'm not advocating that you actively hurt people's feelings. Of course not. But look at it like this, Nancy. If I'm taking the hit in every relationship and I'm getting my feelings hurt because I'm trying to protect you, then I'm like, I'm getting hit, 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 hit. But if I occasionally hurt another person's feelings, those hurt feelings are spread out among the population. There's not just one person that's taken the hit. Like it's your life. It's your life. Those people can't make choices for you in your life. Only you can do that.
It's amazing. So let's role play this out. We're gonna do another role play, Podsters. By the way, that
Okay.
role play, I got so many notes and emails and stuff. And Podsters, if you're listening and you like this, take a screenshot, throw it up on Instagram, tag us. What's your Instagram handle?
At Higher Power Coaching.
Higher Power Coaching, all one word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm Nancy underscore Medoff. Anyway, so let's go back to the email, right? Like you usually have a big party because
Mhm.
I usually have big parties. This is interesting, actually. So I stopped having the parties in December, and I got some pushback. And these were some of my closest friends because they had such a good time at these parties.
Mhm.
And so they would say, so let's say you send me the email, and I say, "Oh, Barb, um, why are, oh my God, I'm so bummed. I love this party. It's the best party. I look forward to it every year. Why aren't you having it?"
So I would say, oh my God, I'm so glad that you've had the best time every year. That makes my heart swell. I'm so glad. And it just doesn't work for me anymore. Or I'm taking a pause on it. Like whatever your legit reason is, share it if you feel
Right.
comfortable
It's
sharing
too
it.
much work for me. It's too
Right.
much work for
Yeah.
me. I don't have as
Right.
much time
Yeah.
as I used to. That,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
It's, as much fun as it is for you, it's actually draining for me. And I've realized I can't keep that up.
And I want to make sure because I know you agree with me on this. You don't need to over explain. It depends on the
No,
person.
no,
Right.
no. I mean,
Okay.
you don't ever need to explain at all, but over explaining is you basically trying to justify
Hmm.
and trying to convince them why it's okay you made the decision you made. Like that was the
Hmm.
story of my life. I would send an email with like 4 paragraphs rather than just say, not going to make it. And the way that I think about it is like this: the more words you say, the more places people have to like peel apart what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yes.
So
Well,
just
yes.
say, like, this is the, like, it's not, I'm sorry you're disappointed, but I just don't have it in me.
And that's so this is a real life scenario. And this person listens to this podcast. So I used to have a holiday party every year. I stopped doing it. And she's a dear, dear friend. And for like 3 years, every year, she was like, "Really? Are you sure? I'm so bummed." Right. And she wasn't being pushy. And I would say, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm bummed too. I just can't do it. The
Hmm.
end. So
Hmm.
finally she stopped pushing back
Hmm.
and maybe I'll do it again. Maybe I won't. But I
Hmm.
think the more you reiterate, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I just
Hmm.
can't do it.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
go away. Like the
Hmm.
conversation stops.
Right. Yeah. So the broken record, I mean, that's essentially what you do when you set boundaries is you're a broken record and you just say, I'm not going to make it. I won't be there. I'm not going to make it. Maybe you didn't hear me, but I'm not going to make it. I won't be there. I'm not going to be there. You just keep saying the same thing. And, notice that I'm saying it with like an even tone. Like the better you get at boundaries, the easier it is to
I
say
yes,
things like that. You
yes.
don't get riled up. In the beginning, you feel like you're going to die. At least that's how I felt, and you're actually not going to die. And I used to say, oh my God, I did it and I didn't die. And I would say that to my fellows in recovery. And I felt like by telling myself I didn't die, I didn't die, I didn't die, it was like I'm telling my like executive functioning brain,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it's going to find its way back into my lizard brain that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't die. See, I have evidence that I didn't die
Mm-hmm.
from setting the boundary.
And for me, for, for, and for me, I would get defensive and angry in the beginning when people would
Mm-hmm.
push back on my boundaries.
Right, of course.
And
Yeah.
again, you do it enough times, it's no longer
Hmm.
an issue. We might have covered this because I know I covered it on one podcast. One of my favorite expressions, and this was a game changer for me. I'm comfortable with my decisions.
Mm,
I'm comfortable
yeah.
with my decisions. That's it. Like
Love that. Yeah.
how do you argue that with someone? You don't. Like
Right. Yeah.
I hear you and I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with my
Mm,
decisions. Boom, end of
mm-hmm.
conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
The other boundary I want to touch on really briefly is you can set a boundary with your behavior, I think. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
We don't need to stand in the middle of town square and be the town crier and say, I am no longer
Mm-hmm.
checking emails 12 times a day, people. You
Mm-hmm.
can simply change the behavior. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
boundary. Like I
Right.
don't do
Yes.
that
Yes.
anymore. So
Right.
um I'm gonna pause for a second. Can you hear these guys in the background?
No.
Amazing. Okay. Okay, so Barb, you know I love having you on here. Tell us
I
what so
love
tell
being
us
here.
I know. So you mentioned because we're gonna wrap up. You mentioned a boundary bundle. Tell the podsters about that because I think it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. 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 So I have a bundle. It's only $25 and it's boundaries for the holidays. And it's how to manage your precious resources of love, money, time, and energy. So there is a worksheet and 2 podcast episodes that go with it. And I gave Nancy all the things. So listen, if you are dreading the holidays because it's so much work and you spend so much money and you don't have the energy and stuff, this is for you. So talk about making decisions ahead of time. This is you thinking about, all right, what matters to me regarding love, money, time, and energy? Where am I actually spending this precious resource? Spending is obviously a metaphor. And then what's the disconnect between the two of those? What's the pattern that I see? And then what are the boundaries that I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
set? And
Mm-hmm.
then maybe looking at all 4 of those precious resources together and seeing, is there a pattern that I have? Because when we see a pattern, we can't change a pattern until we see it. This is what coaching is all about,
Yep.
is coming to see what are my patterns so that I can change them.
Love it. Love it. And how do they get it? Oh, there's going to be a link in the show
So
notes.
yeah, there's going to be a link in the show notes for sure. And also it's in my Instagram link in bio. So I'm at Higher Power Coaching.
Fantastic. Barb, we love you here on Unmute Yourself, the podcast. I hope you come back again. I hope you come back for
I
number 5.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love these conversations.
Great.
I love how like deeply we get into the scenarios and just real practical stuff. Love
Well,
it.
it's right. Like we can talk fluff or we can actually
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about the issues, right?
yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah, yeah.
I love it. So, Podsters, we love you. Until next time, peace out. That's a wrap, Podsters. And before we go, I ask you, what's one thing from today's episode that you'll use this week to unmute yourself? DM me, email me, send a smoke signal, whatever you need to do. Let me know what you're going to do differently. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave a 5-star review on Apple. This helps me spread our message of empowerment to more people worldwide. Let's do this.